Hello and welcome back to Below the Surface. I'm your host, Stephanie Cavigliano, and here comes my co-host, Darshna Kamani.
Hey Stephanie, how are you today?
I'm doing quite well, Darshna. How are you? Good to see you again.
Likewise, I'm doing really well, thank you. Can't quite believe we're nearly at the end of August, though. It seems to have flown by.
Pumpkin spice season is here
Yeah,
already.
that is very true. And I have already seen some Halloween decorations and stuff coming out.
Woo.
It just feels a bit surreal, to be honest. However, did you know 26th August seems to have loads of national, international days?
Ooh, tell me more.
So there's, I don't know if you're a fan of popsicles, Cherry Popsicle Day today.
Cherry popsicle. Oddly
Yes, very
specific.
specific. Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently,
Go ahead, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, apparently it comes from a 11-year-old boy creating it many, many moons ago, and that's why we have Cherry Popsicle Day today.
Oh, okay, cherry must have been his favorite. I was just going to say, skip a popsicle, take me right to the ice cream. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
I am with you 100%, especially on a nice hot summer's day. Nothing beats ice cream for sure. So the other one we have, and none of these are related at all, International Dog Day.
Oh,
If
that's a
you have
good
a little
one.
doggy out there, you definitely need to celebrate your fur friend for today. Treat them a bit more special, I think. And the last one, definitely not least, and I'm sure we'll both agree, it's National Women's Equality Day today as well.
All right, so a treat for your pooch and a treat for the women in your life.
I love it.
Maybe a cherry popsicle for both.
Exactly. Maybe it's their favorite popsicle and then you're winning.
You never know. Right. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start the show. Today's topic is not about cherry popsicles. In fact, we're talking about something much more serious. Today's topic is about ransomware. So this threat seems to be an ongoing dilemma for most organizations with no sign of going away. In fact, it seems ever evolving.
I mean, that's so true, Stephanie. It seems every day you hear about another ransomware attack. In fact, Barracuda recently analysed over 100 attacks to really delve into how this threat has evolved over the years. But just before we bring on our amazing guests who have tons of knowledge in this area, just a quick reminder to say hello in the comment section or feel free to ask questions to our experts and we'll ensure that they get answered. So, shall we bring on the guests, Stephanie?
Yes, let's do that. So today I'd like to welcome to the show Jessica Byrne, Senior Analyst at Forrester, and Barracuda CTO, Fleming Shi. Welcome to the show, Jess and Fleming.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for joining us. It's awesome to have you both on the show today. So before we get into the topic of ransomware, it would be great if you could both tell us a bit about yourself and your role. Jessica, how about we start with you?
Sure. So I'm Jess Byrne. I'm a senior analyst on Forrester's security and risk team, and I have spent my 8 years before joining the analyst ranks as a principal advisor on Forrester's Security and Risk Council. So I've been working directly with chief information security officers for those 8 years, one-on-one, and also bringing them together to solve common challenges that they experience. So, ransomware is clearly one of those challenges, and I'm looking forward to talking about that today.
Awesome. And Fleming?
Yes, I have been on the show before, but nonetheless, I'm the CTO at Barracuda Networks. I joined the company about 17 years ago. Really watched Barracuda transform along with our customers. The journey has been going through various different stages, from appliances to virtual appliances to SaaS applications to native needs really in the cloud. So definitely also excited about sharing what we have studied about ransomware in the last 24 months, and as well as obviously sharing the stage with Jessica, talking about the threat. Yeah.
Great. We're thrilled to have you both. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Ransomware isn't going anywhere. So we've actually just seen some latest trends that tell us that there's recently been a 64% increase in ransomware attacks. Can you tell us a bit more? Jess, I'll start with you.
Yeah, this is something that, my clients and I started talking about probably back in 2019, where it started to evolve from, someone's poor grandma getting, their own computer hit to whole companies being completely paralyzed by this process. So we started to get some questions about, okay, what do I do to prepare for this? What do I need to do to make sure that our company is not going to be a victim of this? And then we're going to talk probably a lot more about that later. The other thing that I think is interesting about ransomware is, again, it has gone from this sort of one-to-one terrible situation to a cottage industry, right? There is ransomware as a service now. So that's happened over the last few years, where the people that are creating this software don't actually have to carry out the ransomware attacks to make money. They're just, using it as a service, and they're giving out to people who are willing to go out there and get those credentials and then start launching attacks. So it's there's customer service associated with it. It's really kind of like horrifically fascinating what's going on with ransomware right now. Fleming, I'm sure you'd agree.
Definitely. In fact, we put a spotlight on ransomware attacks in 2019, really to identify the threat a little bit in how we are prepared for ransomware. So in 2019, we actually covered quite a bit on how municipalities and government, agencies and organizations are not really well prepared. So you can see a lot of attacks happening back then. But just really 2-3 years removed where we are now, the increase of attack, that's number one, but also the breadth, it's really covering a global stage where we even seen large companies, headquartered in Asia, but, have a branch in South America. The entry point comes from there. So also, it's also important to point out, there are many stages of ransomware attack, and email no longer is the only, I will say, the entry point, right? If you think about email, originally people might be delivering malware through that, but those are actually being put away, especially when you have advanced persistent threat capabilities to stop those advanced persistent threats. But now email is just the entry point as a way to phish for credentials, eventually using those credentials, like Jessica mentioned, to attack your infrastructure, let it be network infrastructure, or application infrastructure. We have heard plenty of examples of that that's publicized, where basically the bad guys using legacy credentials to get into the environment, eventually, target the most critical asset, the data. So it's a global problem. It's happening very often. In our study, we actually identified it's every 11 seconds we are likely seeing a ransomware attack. But also to point out, the numbers that we cover are the things that we track. There are so many ransomware victims that they're not willing to speak up. Jessica, you probably know about some of that too, right?
Yes, I think there's a massive underreporting of ransomware going on right now for various reasons. One is probably fear of litigation. One is fear of regulation. There is a whole cyber insurance angle to this, which we'll probably get into later. There's a number of reasons. And then there's just customer trust, right? But eventually, I think transparency should win out. There's also the issue of information sharing, which people are not learning if they're not hearing about how these attacks are happening, and I think that's really important for the industry.
Definitely.
Thank you. So, in the research, Fleming, you talk about double extortion, and then I've heard you in various conversations talk about the post-breach era. Can I ask you to talk a bit more about both of those and what they mean?
Absolutely. So I will start with the post-breach era. That's how I see where we are right now, right? So it's no longer just trying to find you and, target somebody and, go ahead and get their information and attack. A lot of our data have been lost. This type of data we have lost in the recent past, I would just say last decade plus. Some of them are very personal information, and that actually will help the bad guys create their ability to really carry out these attacks with a lot of preparation. So, from the early days, maybe not even early days, just a few years back when Equifax lost our information, that's enough to actually draw a linkage between people. Then if you look at what's really happening now, we even see supply chain attacks that basically are weaponizing people's software updates, weaponizing additional, findings in those data to actually go after people. So we're in a position where we're basically no longer can say, I'm not going to be a victim, or just having backup is enough, or just having email security is enough. So we're in that situation. So the extortion almost comes along with the ransomware attack for every single case now, because when they get hold of your data, their way of doing business is no longer just giving you the key and you have to pay for the key to open, to restore your data, but also hold you hostage on potentially publishing the data they have got their hands on, right? Therefore, it's actually a problem because a lot of businesses depend on the customer trust, and the reputation of their brand can be really, really damaged if you're not paying in those cases. So that's the trigger the criminals are looking to pull when that happens.
Yeah, I think security leaders need to prepare for both, right? The scenario is double extortion. So even if the key is given and you've gotten your data back, they probably still have it, right? And there's, I've heard of a couple of companies. I think there was an eyewear manufacturer in Italy last year that just kept getting hit over and over. It was never over for them because that data was exfiltrated and there was still demands being made and leakage happening out there on the internet. It's something that when you're running through your crisis management scenarios, you need to assume that you will be reporting a breach at some point, even if you thought you've handled it by paying the ransom.
Exactly.
So something else that we hear about, and Fleming, you touched briefly on this, is that it's really not just about the click anymore. So it now goes far beyond just a phishing attack. What else do folks need to be wary of?
Absolutely. So one of the key area I would say is pay attention to how you allow users or your customers interact with your systems. So application security, infrastructure security goes beyond the point of just prevention of an intrusion, but also really be prepared for stolen credentials that's valid. Could be a legacy credential that of an ex-employee. Those credentials can be utilized against your environment without triggering the alarms because they're still valid. Because maybe you have missed a step in offboarding, for example, or basically in a scenario where maybe even a device or infrastructure component that does not have proper MFA or authentication scheme, you can end up in a situation where they're inside legitimately, in quotes, but utilizing stolen credentials, right? So I think that's really key. If you look at web applications, just a simple website with some access from your employees to be able to publish data or a form, those will be enough as a attack surface for the bad guys to get in. So if you look at that, it is an important thing to implement web application firewalling. You're using a SaaS solution or appliance solution. Also, I would say try to eliminate VPN access as much as you can, because you want not eliminate, but just limit the access and reduce the attack surface as much as you can for your employees as well, because you want to minimize what they need to do their job.
Yeah. So this again, attack surface is such an important thing. We've spoken with so many clients that have, done a massive asset discovery exercise and realized, oh my gosh, what did marketing do over here? Why is there a cloud instance spun up that I didn't realize existed? What is in this ecosystem of customer communications that we have there that is a fourth party or, just a larger supply chain risk that's associated with our organization and our brand? And again, the credentials thing, I can't agree with Fleming enough on that. It's so beyond the click. You have to assume, and this is where the concept of zero trust comes in, you have to assume that someone is already gotten those credentials somehow and that they're on the inside, right? There is no perimeter anymore. You have to just assume that people are working with the credentials that they've purchased out there in the dark web and start to apply zero trust principles to your entire ecosystem.
So Jess, you mentioned zero trust there. Can we delve into that a bit more?
I'm from Forrester.
Perfect. So yeah, just like the principles that you talked about, and how does zero trust obviously play a part in, I guess, the fight against ransomware?
Yeah, I think zero trust is incredibly important in the fight against ransomware because of the principles, right? So you have to go into it assuming that you have to have all entities be untrusted by default. It's just has to be your default setting that no matter who you are, what you are, if you were trusted in the past, these entities are untrusted by default. You have to make sure that least privilege access is enforced all over the map, right? This is something that you need to, this isn't just a one-time deal either. You need to constantly review those privileges, right? So if we look at something like Colonial Pipeline, there was an old password, there was old privileges there that were just sort of hanging out for the taking. And then you have to do comprehensive monitoring all the time of your entire ecosystem. So that principle, if you're designing your network infrastructure, if you're designing your technology stack, if you're working with your cloud providers and software as a service partners, there's zero trust. You have to just by default not trust the connections that are made between your organization and all those entities.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm with Jessica on this. I think zero trust is an important element in fight against ransomware, partially because if you look at the MITRE attack framework, there's 14 phases. Out of all 14 phases, 5 of those phases that involves potential phishing tactics, right? So if you think about trusting one area, you will probably miss another. So you really have to go down to zero trust and implement as little privileges you need to provide to someone's work or someone's interactivity with your environment. So absolutely important element of the fight. Yeah.
So there's really a lot that an organization needs to do to secure themselves, their data, their team against these types of attacks. And I think for SMBs especially, this can get really challenging. How can small to medium-sized businesses ensure that their team is secure?
Yeah, I think that I will take on that one. So partially because the tactics are just so sophisticated now. I just give you one example. In credential access, there's over 45 tactics just in that one phase in the attack framework from MITRE. For small, medium-sized businesses, it's really difficult to actually be able to understand all the 45 different tactics or even more because it's constantly growing, right? So even MFA, they have ways to get around that. They can intercept your two-factor by using SIM swapping, for example, social engineered, of course. But generally, I think the right thing to do is eventually look at everything that you have, all the attack surfaces, and this is kind of the important part where you need telemetry, you need information, you need to correlate this information and be able to basically remediate in any part of those 14 phases. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, yes, obviously there are ways to get around things like MFA, but I think when you look at SMBs, oftentimes they don't have a named security leader, they don't have a program in place. If there's just a way to look at the basic things like remove admin rights, local admin rights, very simple things, because attackers are going to be looking for the easy way in and low-hanging fruit. And for SMBs, oftentimes some of these things aren't thought of. Strong passwords even. Nobody loves the password, but it's still there in most organizations. If you have a strong password and you have MFA, you've at least eliminated the really easy, low-hanging fruit way in. And then privilege, again, the least privileged is so important. If you have privileged accounts with admin rights, make sure that that's locked down and that's really limited to the number of people in the organization, and then you've got multi-factor on that. And then, just looking at your endpoints, some sort of monitoring, to your point, Fleming, has to be in there.
Yeah, exactly.
And then patching, which I think people just don't love. Something like that needs to be looked at. This is where people need to take that seriously and do it on time. All of this is basic, but for SMBs is probably quite vital for their survival in an incident like this.
Yeah, to that point, actually, Jessica, we recently did a study on phishing, and the targets are no longer just the C-suites. They target IT folks because they know those folks have probably escalated privileges. Same thing as the sales team, because sales team they're usually designed to, or maybe their mentality is, I got to respond to a PO, right? Their behavior is easier for a phishing attack, right? So absolutely right about making sure reduce the privilege, and least privilege is really important, and also all aspects, including zero trust on your endpoints, be able to measure the security posture, like the patching part. If they're not well positioned in their OS patches, they shouldn't have access to certain critical infrastructure or SaaS applications. Yeah. But that's just a start, because we're going to get to that X topic next, right?
We're going to try.
We are. We are indeed. So, I mean, you've mentioned passwords and some stuff that, I mean, people have an understanding about, and there is, I guess, some new solutions like Zero Trust that we've talked about and XDR. And with things that are newer and people don't fully understand how to utilize them, come myths of, what is Zero Trust network access, what is XDR? Can you walk through them and tell us what we really should know? And Jess, do you want to start with the Zero Trust part?
Yes, so ZTNA, we have a lot of Z's and X's and all of these Zero Trust, but ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access, I think that there's some myths around that is sort of the same as Zero Trust Edge, or what other folks are calling SASE. And Zero Trust Network Access is really just a component of that, right? Ultimately, that's going to be what, as Forrester likes to say, kills the VPN, right? That's a crusade. That's been a crusade of ours. Obviously, kill it and replace it with something else, and that's where Zero Trust Network Access comes in. So it really reduces the need for employee VPNs, and it makes way for the infrastructure and security teams to adopt those cloud deliver networking and security capabilities. So, and that's part of that Zero Trust Edge. So, this is something that ZTNA can be hosted on premise or delivered in cloud as a service, which is typically preferable right now for our end user clients. So I think understanding what goes with what and what's part of what. So ZTNA, not Zero Trust Edge or SASE, it's just a piece of it. So hopefully that helps to clarify.
Awesome, thank you. And then Fleming, I guess maybe if you could delve into XDR for us.
Yeah, definitely. Off ZTNA topic there, really, if you think about, the world is really adapting to SaaS, right? SaaS applications is the #1 tool that's really being utilized by everyone. But if you look at what's really happening is there's still access through VPNs today. There's still transitioning. There's still people touching email and clicking on links at times, and also obviously data protection and your data, how it's being used, and in all different 3 states of data. But if you think about XDR, X really stands for everything in our view. D really stands for detection, R is response. So now the world is moving a little bit faster towards detection and response instead of just prevention, right? So detection and response is about catching the signal, understand the kill chain, and understand the attack is really happening, and be able to stop that attack as early as possible before it gets to the point where you have to figure out how to negotiate the ransom and all that. So my point there is that XDR is complex. So one of the things that Barracuda is really thinking through is our customers, if you just hand them an XDR solution, it will take them a while, maybe even a lot of resources to operate. So Barracuda actually is looking at XDR as making it more consumable, delivering a type of a service. Basically, you can benefit from a SOC as a service through our MSP division, and as well as through MSPs or MSSPs, to make sure you get the benefit of XDR. So to really dive into the technology, actually we do have a customer conference coming up in September. We're going to have a dedicated XDR track that we talk about the capabilities and the solutions involved to make our XDR more consumable, more easier to access for our SMB customers. Yeah.
Great. So how do these 2 technologies, ZTNA, XDR, actually help with combating the threat of ransomware? Maybe you can start us off here, Jess, with ZTNA.
Yeah, so again, this comes down to trusted access, right? This is replacing the VPN, which has got some issues. And when everybody went to work from home, there were also just scale issues for something like the VPN. So ZTNA helps organizations understand who is accessing that network or that particular application and where they're coming from, and does a lot of that reconnaissance work to understand whether this is actually the person that they're supposed to be getting into there. And again, access is a key pillar of zero trust, and it's a key pillar in combating ransomware.
Yep, definitely. And in fact, if you think about the colonial scenario, if it was not a VPN access, you at least reduce the attack surface. If that particular organization allowed only access to the applications they need for their jobs, so the public-facing surface is reduced, it will help a lot. With XDR, if you think about it, is the signal, right? Even you had a VPN in place. If the signal is showing someone's logging in with, like, the ex-employee is logging in, right? Yeah. And with that, they're moving around, right? If you think about all that data might be sitting in the VPN device, or maybe the terminator that's really capturing this. But if it's actually put into a place where the data lake is able to extract the information, correlate it to attack, to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and identify that's a technique for somebody coming into your environment, now you have the ability to actually have alerts, actually implement the playbook to actually stop the attack, right? So these two things are definitely going to be the future, I would say, important elements of the future fight against ransomware or any type of data breach and cyber attack. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Really useful information there. So we've talked about the attacks, we've talked about some of the solutions and what organizations can do. But as we know, the attacks unfortunately do happen, and then the attackers ask for demands, and those ransomware demands can be quite high.
Yes.
So with that in mind, where does cyber insurance come into play when it comes to these demands? Should all organizations have insurance, and how does it help?
So yeah, I can start with this. I'm actually doing some research right now around the role of cyber insurance in incident response, and it's been really, really rather eye-opening. And I think the first thing I want to say to folks is to the question of should everyone have cyber insurance is, cyber insurance isn't cybersecurity. There is no way to fully transfer the risk onto your insurance company. Cyber insurance should be looked at as a over and above layer of protection for an absolutely unforeseen event or circumstance. It is not there to replace the basic blocking and tackling and process that you need to do within your organization. It does not replace a mature security program. And if I was a betting person, in this case I would say that cyber insurance is going to get a lot harder to get for organizations. I've spoken with many security leaders that said year over year, the difference in how to renew the policy versus getting it in the first place was off the charts. It's not a straight renewal of cyber insurance. You need to provide a lot more information about your security posture. You need to name some of the tools that you're using for XDR, EDR, monitoring, identity and access management. You need to prove posture. So this is now becoming a board level issue. So yes, I think it's important for companies to have it, but I think it's important for them to have it for things that they could not possibly plan for. And ransomware, unfortunately, is something that you should be planning for. So that's my take on insurance right now.
Yeah. So yeah, my thoughts, just exactly what Jessica mentioned. I even mentioned it in the past. Insurance is designed for unplanned, incidents, like our fire insurance, our flood insurance. Now the attacks are not unplanned. I think just remember you have a target. You're always a target. We're in the post-breach era. If you have assets, you have customer data, you have public-facing assets, you potentially are on the target list, right? So consider insurance is just some way of really getting yourself to be ready for an unplanned attack. But like Jessica mentioned, all the cyber attacks beyond just ransomware attacks for their insurance companies, it's no longer an unplanned situation. It's probably going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that leads nicely into my next question here, Fleming. You know, response is going to be just as critical here as protection is for organizations. So how should these businesses be thinking about their incident response strategy?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you look at really start pay attention to your capabilities as far as whether you have the resources, you have the team, and have the right, mindset and culture internally to really get ready for responding to a ransomware attack, right? So your security team needs to be set up to succeed, not to fail. Make sure they have the right amount of budget and resources to really deal with this. And also remember, if things do get too hard, and if your business is not in a way to basically be able to respond with hiring more people or understanding all the technology, call your MSSP or MSP, right? Their job is there to help you with this stuff. And it is much harder compared to 17 years ago when I started working with Barracuda. Things were much more simple. But today's world, just look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's taunting to look at all the tactics the bad guys have, right?
Yeah, and in terms of incident response plans and strategies, they're nothing if you don't test them, right? And if they sit in a drawer and you don't really break them out and actually go through them with comprehensive tabletop exercises that have a ransomware specific scenario, you're not going to be prepared, right? And this is where your MSSP can get involved. Absolutely, they should be a part of any type of tabletop exercise that you do, as should your ecosystem of folks at all parts of the business. You can do a technical tabletop exercise, but what's critically important is doing a real huge crisis management exercise, right? That involves marketing, that involves legal, that involves your outside counsel, that involves your cyber insurance company, that also brings in your selected breach coach, which is typically external counsel, or someone that does ransomware negotiations and payments. There are folks that do that specifically. This all needs to be run through, and that plan and your policy and things like that you need to refer to need to be somewhere else that you can get to. You may even want to get your board involved, because if you are busy and members of your organization are shut down, they may be the spokespeople for that organization, some member of that board. They need to also get that media training. I can't stress that enough. Like there's so much that needs to go into a crisis management plan beyond just an incident response plan, especially when it comes to a very public ransomware incident.
Yep.
Thank you both. That's really insightful. So, unbelievably, we are coming close to the end of the show.
That did go fast.
It went really fast. So, any final thoughts or advice? Jess, anything from you?
So, again, nailing the basics just sets you up for at least not getting hit with something that was entirely preventable. Yes, attacks are much more sophisticated, but it doesn't really substitute for just the basic blocking and tackling and having the foundation of a security program. And then just use the threat of ransomware if you need it. If you've tried all kinds of carrots to get the investments that you need for your security program, use ransomware as a stick. Use skyrocketing cyber insurance premiums as a stick to get the investment that you need and get the buy-in that you need for your process, because all the tools in the world won't help if you cannot do attestation for privilege, right? You need to have people in the business units gets involved. This is everybody's responsibility, because your integrity is everybody's responsibility as an organization. So again, lots to think about, but that's my parting words on this.
Yeah, I think from my end, I just wanted to remind everyone the attacks are happening against all different organization types as well as sizes, right? So the bad guys even took advantage of COVID-19 pandemic to attack healthcare workers and all the important parts of the critical infrastructure we live by. So it is important to realize we're in a world where breaches already happened. A lot of data is already getting into the bad guys' hands. And when the imminent attack happens, you really need to be prepared to say no. And those are, my advice to really get ready for a really good security program to deal with ransomware as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Really great. That's all we have time for, but thank you both. Thank you so much, Jess and Fleming, for joining us today. We appreciate your insights, and hopefully our audience has taken home some key points to fight against ransomware.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for having me too.
Thank you both. That's been awesome. So I hope you all enjoyed the show. Remember, you can watch all our LinkedIn live shows from the Barracuda LinkedIn page. The links will be below for any topics we've mentioned, any kind of advice we can help you with. Take a look in the comment section. Also, just a reminder that we do have our Secure to 21 customer conference coming up in September, where there is a ransomware track, so you can get a lot more detail about ransomware and how to fight against it. For now, however, that leaves me to say until next time, have a safe journey.